You're listening to Medscape's In Discussion series on multiple sclerosis, a podcast where thought leaders and clinical experts share their diverse insights and practical ideas for optimizing patient care. This series is hosted by Dr. Ann Cross. Dr. Cross is a professor of neurology and holds the Manny and Rosalind Rosenthal, Dr. John Trotter MS Chair in Neuroimmunology at Washington University and Barnes-Jewish Hospital in St. Louis, Missouri. Relevant disclosures can be found with the episode show notes on medscape.com. The topics and discussions are planned, produced, and reviewed independently of advertisers. This podcast is intended only for U.S. healthcare professionals.
Hello, I am Dr. Ann Cross, and welcome to Medscape's In Discussion series on multiple sclerosis. Diet and lifestyle factors appear to be involved in risk of developing MS, and studies indicate that risk of MS is increased by genetic susceptibility and by environmental factors, of which diet and lifestyle may play large roles. Notably, MS is more frequent in first world countries where a typical diet is high in saturated fats and sugars, as well as high in calories, compared to the diet of third world countries where MS is less common. Many people with MS are very interested in dietary and lifestyle changes that might improve their symptoms or prognosis. A survey a few years ago found that 91% of respondents were interested in diets that might help manage their MS. Now, I'd like to introduce Dr. Ilana Katz, MD, who is an associate professor of neurology at the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai Hospital in Manhattan. In addition, she is the associate director of the Corinne Goldsmith Dickinson Center for MS and the co-director of the C. Alston Patient Wellness Program at the Mount Sinai Hospital. One of Dr. Katz-Sand's main research interests is the role of specific diets and dietary components in relationship to MS outcomes, and that's going to be the topic of most of our discussion today. But first, Dr. Katz-Sand, please tell us a bit about yourself. Why did you choose medicine and the field of neurology to study, and what led you to MS as a particular field of neurology?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. It's really exciting to be here today. So in terms of my background and how I got here, thinking about career options, way back when, I really wanted to do something that I was going to feel was important and where I would feel motivated to come to work every day and really be able to make a difference. My father happens to be a neurologist, and so I had the wonderful opportunity to hang out with him when I was a kid before there were all these rules and regulations like we have now. I used to just go with him into the hospital on weekends and stuff to see patients, and I just really loved that intersection between science and having the opportunity to really make a difference in people's lives. So that was how I got into medicine. Of course, I had that background in neurology, and so I was always really interested in it from hanging out with my dad. But I think more broadly, the brain controls everything, right? So I found neurology really fascinating for that reason. I was one of those people who went through medical school, and I actually loved almost every specialty that I rotated through, and thought each time I was, maybe this is it. This is great. I love this. So I had a really hard time deciding, but at the end of the day, I just kept coming back to neurology. I think it's just such a fascinating field. And then as I went through my residency, again, I thought all the subspecialties were really interesting, and I think I probably would have been happy doing any one of them. But I just was drawn to MS because, first of all, a lot of the patients are women. And as I looked around me and saw, you, Dr. Cross, are the exception. Most of the people I was looking at around me when I was training were men in the fields. And I thought, I relate really well to this patient population. I think I can be useful here in terms of, shared experiences. And I loved the idea of getting to have long-term relationships with people. And so that was something I was really interested in. And then I just really loved how the field was changing so much. It was important to me to be able to feel like I was able to really do something for people. And so it was a wonderful time right when I was coming into my fellowship in 2011, where the field was really changing a lot and where we were making great progress in terms of treatments and what we can do for people. And so that seemed like a really exciting place to be from a clinical standpoint, but also from a research standpoint. It was a field that there's still so much more to do and where I felt like I could be useful and I'd be able to contribute going forward. So that's how I got here.
Yeah, that's great. I, for one, am very happy that you chose neurology and MS, and I'm sure your patients are happy too. So, Dr. Katz has recently completed and published a two-center study of diets in MS, and it's an observational study. And I'm wondering if she could tell us a little bit about that study. It had some intriguing results that she might want to share with us. And I believe she may have had a second publication on that come out maybe today that she can share with us as well.
Yeah, so I'll tell you a little bit about some of the work that we've done. When I was a fellow, one of the things that really struck me was how little evidence we had about diet. So I immediately noticed, of course, as all of us clinicians do, that this is something that so many of our patients ask about during our clinical visits. But when I had asked my mentors about it and looked in the literature, I found that there really wasn't a lot to guide us. At the same time, I observed that my patients who seemed to be really committed to good overall health, they seem to be doing better from a disability standpoint. And I just thought there has to be something here. So really what I wanted to do at the beginning was just go for it and start running interventional studies. But of course, that was jumping the gun. And people quickly told me, I got very deserved feedback saying, you don't have preliminary data for this on efficacy from a feasibility standpoint. You don't know how, if this is even going to work, are you going to be able to run these kinds of clinical trials? And so I said, okay, we have to kind of do this in a stepwise fashion and, figure out a more measured approach. So that was how we decided to run our first small pilot study. And in that study, which we published in 2019, we randomly assigned 36 women with MS either to follow or not follow a modified Mediterranean dietary intervention. And the study went great. Really what we were looking at there was clinical trial feasibility. We weren't sure that we'd be able to recruit our target, which was to get 30 patients in a single center in 1 year. We were able to get to 36 within 9 months, so we stopped recruiting. So we were really excited about that. The other things we were looking at were adherence, which again, we were looking for a target of about 80% self-reported adherence, and we actually hit about 94%. So, things went really well from that standpoint. Almost everyone in the study completed it, with the exception of one person who kind of went missing and one who unfortunately moved in the middle of the study. But otherwise, people were excited about it. They were able to follow the program for 6 months. And so we thought, okay, we can do this. So then we wanted to look at how can we get some data, again, with the goal of eventually getting toward big clinical trials, but how can we get some data about diet as a disease modifier? We have to do observational studies. And so that's where the Radiums paper comes in. So that was the first piece of work that we did. So the Radiums cohort, which stands for Reserve Against Disability in Early MS, is a really wonderful cohort that is run by my colleague, Dr. Jim Samowski, who is an MS neuropsychologist. And we've been so fortunate to have him here at our center for a number of years now. It's an NIH-funded cohort. We enrolled 185 people in 2016 and 2017 into this study. They were all within 5 years of MS diagnosis. These are young people. The average age in the study at enrollment was 34, and the average time from diagnosis was about 2 years. The median EDSS really, it's 0. It's, fortunately when people were early on, so we couldn't really look at clinical outcomes in that group at baseline. But what we could do was look at imaging. And so what we did was everyone had completed a food frequency questionnaire when they entered the study at baseline, which is a really extensive dietary inventory from which we can calculate, where people fall out on different patterns. And so we applied a score, which is called a MIND score. And MIND is a Mediterranean DASH intervention for neurodegenerative delay. The idea was for it to be a Mediterranean pattern, but kind of with specific call outs for items that they think are of particular importance for people who have neurodegenerative diseases based on really preclinical literature, so purely observational, and their MRIs. And what I think the most interesting finding from that paper really was that we found a link between the MIND score and thalamic volume. Of course, we don't expect to see, widespread atrophy and, overall decreased volumes. That's something that comes later, is not affected in people who don't have MS, right? So when you think about people who are in their 30s who don't have MS, right, it's very different. So this is something that we think is definitely a pathologic finding. And so the fact that we were able to see that association in people so early in disease was really interesting to us. So then just getting to the paper that we're really excited published today in MSJ, that's now online. There we wanted to look clinically at outcomes, which we couldn't do in radium. So what we did was we looked at our comprehensive annual assessment cohort. We're very fortunate here, beginning in late 2018, we started a program through our neuropsychology clinic, which Dr. Samowski directs. And there we now run this comprehensive annual assessment. We have the patients fill out a bunch of different patient-reported outcomes, questionnaires. They fill out a dietary screener, which is the MEDAS, which is a Mediterranean diet adherence screener. It's 14 questions and people get assigned a score there. But they also fill out questionnaires about fatigue and mood, all kinds of things. And then they come in person and do an assessment where we do a 9-hole peg test, an SDMT, a timed 25-foot walk, and a bunch of other assessments that we do through that clinic. So longitudinally, it's a great resource for patients, and definitely for research, we'll be using this cohort longitudinally too. But here we just looked at the baseline data. And the primary outcome here was to look to see whether there was a link between their MEDAS score, the Mediterranean scale, and the MSFC. And the wonderful thing about this cohort is that there are patients and we ask them a lot of questions. And so unlike in a lot of other dietary studies, we were able to really control nicely for a lot of confounders. So, right, that's a big problem with observational studies of diet is these behaviors all are linked. And so here we were actually able to control really rigorously for demographic factors. We put together a very nice socioeconomic status index that looks not only at, IQ, essentially literacy, but also looks at parental education levels. And so that's folded in there. And then we looked at a broad range of health-related factors too. So, diabetes, hypertension, high cholesterol, BMI. We even looked at sleep. And after really rigorously controlling for all of the exercise, all of those factors, we were still able to see a pretty robust association between people's score on that dietary scale and their MSFC. So we were really excited about that. And we also found associations with a whole bunch of patient-reported outcomes that we have reported in the paper. And so that brings us up to date to now.
I will just reiterate that this paper came out on October the 13th, 2022 in Multiple Sclerosis Journal, if our listeners want to look it up. So was there any specific component of the MS functional composite, the MSFC, that was associated with higher metascores or?
Yes, actually all three components, more so the 9-hole peg and SDMT, but timed 25-foot walk was also that the association was smaller. But yes, the individual components also had those associations.
And would you mind elaborating a little bit on the modified Mediterranean diet that you mentioned versus the MIND diet? Are there differences between those two?
Yeah, it's a good question. Not really. So we called it a modified Mediterranean diet because, when people hear Mediterranean diet, Mediterranean can mean so many things to different people. So we called it modified in that we kind of made our own adjustments and rules for it. What we did there really was to emphasize the components that you get points for when you do a MIND score. Because we were running a pilot study, we decided to even make it a little cleaner. And we decided that rather than de-emphasizing certain components, we were just going to eliminate them because it was a pilot study and it's kind of easier to do things that way and then consider adding little pieces back later. So we actually entirely eliminated meat in that study. And we also had eliminated dairy from that study. So when we ran the pilot, those two things were out. And that helped us really emphasize things that are emphasized in the MIND score. So things like fresh fruits and vegetables. We told people if you're going to eat grains, they need to be whole grains. We emphasized fish, nuts. So really most of the things that you get high scores for in MIND, and you lose points in MIND for things like baked goods, butter, which are out when you eliminate dairy.
And when you say eliminated meat, do you mean all meat, like chicken and turkey also, or just red meat?
We did for that study because we thought it was going to be too difficult. There were some questions that came up, such as, well, is meat okay if it's grass-fed? Or is it okay if it's chicken and it's without antibiotics? And we said, you know what, this is too nuanced. And for a pilot, we're just going to make it as clean and easy as possible. We're just taking it all out. And we really want to get people to up their intake of these other foods. And that will help us accomplish that. So we took it out entirely. I think for future trials, we're going to focus more on the overall score and less on these individual components. I think it'll be less about eliminating one thing or another entirely and really more about the overall pattern, which is what we encouraged in the pilot too.
And so, big question, you may not know the answer to this, but I suspect you are working on it. What is the mechanisms of action that might be going on here?
Definitely working on it. So for the radium study, for example, we collected samples from everyone at year 3, and we're processing those now. So we actually got data back recently on metabolomics, which our collaborator, Dr. Kate Fitzgerald at Hopkins, is working on actually as we speak. We collected stool samples from people, and so we have a collaborator here at Sinai, Dr. Jose Clemente, who's helping us do those analyses. And so, we're looking at all of this. We have a new project that Dr. Samowski and I just put in with Dr. Jen Graves at UCSD, where we're actually really interested in thinking about biological aging as a potential mediator of some of these effects that we're seeing. But I would say overall, broadly speaking, you can think about direct effects of dietary metabolites, and then you can think about indirect effects that are mediated through gut microbiota, for example. In terms of direct effects, everything we eat has a chemical structure, just like our pharmaceuticals. And these different dietary metabolites can have direct effects on cells in the gut. They also diffuse widely through the peripheral circulation. They bind to receptors on metabolic organs and on immune cells. And foods that get you points on a MIND score are going to be high in fiber. They're going to be high in antioxidants. We already know that Mediterranean patterns have been shown to have beneficial effects, not specifically in MS populations, but in the general population, this has been studied in terms of gut microbiota. And the composition and the function of the microbiota are really heavily influenced by diet. So which bacteria are present and which metabolites they produce, which in turn is going to have effects on the local immune system in the gut. And then in a lot of distant effects are really determined in large part by the diet. So we think that, there are probably multiple contributory mechanisms, and we're going to study them all.
Thank you. Another topic I was hoping we could touch upon is lifestyle and lifestyle factors. Have you studied this?
Yeah, so we're really interested, especially even from a clinical standpoint, we're really interested in comprehensive care in MS. And we think that really should include not only all of the work that we all do on talking to people about their disease modifying therapies and watching their MRIs and watching their labs, but actually should really be looking at our patients as whole people and really being thoughtful about lifestyle, because I think that there are a lot of factors there that can really make a big difference for people, right? We know that if we have 2 different patients who start in the same place and we put them on the same DMT, one of them may do great and the other might not. And so we really have to be thinking about what are the modifiable factors where we can intervene and really have important influences on prognosis in our patients. So here at our center, we've been really fortunate to be able to start a patient wellness program, which we launched about 2 years ago, right at the beginning of the pandemic. And we've been really working hard on this program over the last 2 years and will continue to do so. And when people come into our wellness program, they meet with our nurse practitioner, with the dietitian, with the physical therapist, and with the social worker to really try to get a holistic view and recommendations coming at things, from multiple spheres. We just have so much work to do in this area. But of course, I think the only way forward with all of these things is to really rigorously demonstrate that through proper clinical trials, because that's the way things actually move, right? That's the way we get clinicians to change the way they practice. It's the way we are able to motivate our patients to do the things that we think are good for them when we can prove it. And it's the way that we get insurance reimbursement for these kinds of services, which right now are poorly reimbursed, if at all. So I think that's what we need to do.
Thank you. This is fantastic work. It's very important work, and it certainly will impact how practitioners and patients function in the future. So, great, good luck to you on this. And I want to thank Dr. Ilana Katz-Sand for joining us today and enlightening us on her studies in diet and her future plans, and studies on lifestyle, and wish her the best of luck in the future. And congratulations on your brand new paper in Multiple Sclerosis Journal. This is Dr. Ann Cross for In Discussion.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Medscape's In Discussion Multiple Sclerosis podcast series with our host, Dr. Ann Cross. Be sure to look for more In Discussion episodes wherever you get your podcasts. Check out medscape.com for show notes, links, and more information on multiple sclerosis.